Lights Out, Chapter 4. I'm going to read half of it. Sorry. When the Vice President came on, he really had no news to report. He confirmed that Air Force One had been destroyed, but there was still no definite word on the President. Condolences were offered to those who had lost loved ones, and promises of help were made to those who had lost their homes. He reported that the experts were still working on the source of the burst. He encouraged everyone to work with FEMA and their local authorities, and he rebuked those who would start riots and make a bad situation worse. He assured everyone that most of the power would be back on in 2 or 3 days at the most. He promised he would be speaking to the nation every day at this time until the situation was back to normal. Afterwards, one of the network's talking heads came on to microanalyze what the VP had said. "I guess we don't need to listen to this," Mark said as he turned off the radio. "Jim, would you walk down to this meeting with me? Maybe your experiences in dealing with Gunny will come in handy." The two men walked down the road and discussed what they had to get done before dark. Finishing setting up the campers was the first priority, and pumping some water was next. The women could fix dinner as soon as the campers were set up. Mark wanted to plug the deep freeze into the generator for a while too. Everything else could wait until tomorrow. When they got to John Olson's house, there were several men already there. Mark introduced Jim to the ones he knew. They were all cordial, but none were very friendly. By the time John called the meeting to order, a few more had shown up. "I think the first thing we need to do is to put a 24-hour guard at the entrance to the subdivision. I think it should be 2 men at a time for 4-hour shifts," John began. "That means we need 12 men each day. If we have 24 volunteers, then everyone will just have to do 1 shift every other day. We can alternate the shifts every week by day and night, between day and night. That way nobody gets stuck with a bad shift forever." Mark was watching most of the other men nodding their heads. "Excuse me, John, but if we needed guards, why would we need them for weeks? The power's going to be back on in 2 or 3 days, or maybe a little longer than that out here, but it isn't going to be weeks." "I know that's what they're saying, Mark, but we don't think it's true. Tell them, Scott." "Okay," one of the men said to John. He turned to face everyone. "My name is Scott Simmons. Most of you don't know me, but those who do know, I work for City Power and Light. I do repair work. And today we were not too far from our office when the burst hit. We walked back to the office and they told us to get home however we could, and that they would announce on the radio when they needed us to come in." "I don't see what that proves," Mark stated flatly. "Let me finish. You see, we heard they also sent home the crews from the 2 coal-powered generating plants. Supposedly the control systems and most of the spare parts were fried by the burst. Some of those parts have a 6-month lead time when things are normal. The factory that makes our control circuits supplies almost all of them for most of North America, and it runs on electricity, which it doesn't have. Even if they get it running on backup power, there's no telling how long it's going to take to make replacements for all of the generating stations in just the major cities. It's kind of funny if you think about it. They can't make electricity without the circuit boards, and they can't make the circuit boards without electricity. The good news is that our auxiliary natural gas-powered generators were not online that early in the day. They only kick them in during the peak demand, which is usually late afternoon when it's the hottest. They said they might be able to get them running again in a few days, but they can only supply about 10% of the city's normal power demand. And they run on natural gas that has to be pumped by, you guessed it, electric pumps. Then there's a job of replacing every transformer in town. I work for CPL. And I don't even know how many there are, but they have to number in the tens of thousands. We have crews to replace 150 to maybe 200 in a 24-hour period. The worst thunderstorm we've had in the last 10 years took out just over 300 transformers. Think about it. Sometimes after a bad storm, some areas don't have power for 2 days, and that's just to replace 200 to 300 transformers. Now we have to replace maybe 100,000. All of the spares we had were on the ground outside behind the offices. One of the engineers told me that the EMP cooked them too, even though they weren't connected to the grid. You see, the burst charged them, and they grounded out through the ground. Now, I don't know how long it's going to take the transformer companies to produce enough transformers to replace every single one in America, but you can bet your sweet ass it's going to take more than 3 days. Did the engineers tell you all of that? Mark asked. Parts of it. The rest is just common sense, Scott replied defensively. Okay, let's assume Scott's right, and it's going to be months or maybe even years before we have power again. What do you think placing 2 guards at the entry is going to accomplish? Mark argued. They can make sure nobody gets in if they don't live here, someone in the group answered. How are they going to do that? Shoot anybody they don't know? They could shoot out their tires, a man Mark didn't recognize said. Mark rubbed his chin for a moment. Well, about 99% of the cars aren't running, and even if some kids did come out here in a running car, what are you going to do after you shoot out their tires? Now they're stuck here. Who's going to put them up and feed them? Or were you going to reinstitute the firing squad? No one answered for a long moment. Well, some of us would just feel better not having a couple of guys with rifles at the entrance, just to, if nothing else, discourage the riffraff, John said. Is it even legal for us to put armed guards on the road? Ted Petrie, a professor at San Antonio College, asked. It's a private road. We can do whatever we damn well please, the tire shooter said with a smug look. If they were having riots in San Antonio, then I might agree to the guards, but until then I think it's silly. Mark really wanted to use the word stupid, but thought better of it. He looked around and saw only 3 or 4 people nodding in agreement with him. Let's take a vote. I think that only subdivision homeowners should vote, though, John said, looking at Jim. Anyone disagree? No one said anything. All those who think we should post some guards and would be willing to volunteer, raise your hand. Almost all the hands went up. Looks like the ayes have it. I'll make the schedule for the first week, John said. It was quiet for a moment. Okay, then. I think that's enough for now. If there's nothing else. John, can I say one more thing? Mark asked. Who could stop you? John said, rolling his eyes. Mark ignored the sarcasm. I may disagree about the guards, but we're still all neighbors. Jim and I are going home and hooking up a gasoline generator to my well. If any of you needs water, just bring up something to put it in. Heck, if you don't have anything to put it in, just come down and we'll figure out how to get it back to your place. The expression on almost everyone's face changed. That's it. Lights out.